Good morning and an early Shabbat Shalom. On Rosh Hashanah, I shared with you a mashal, a story about a king in a field. We learned in the story that the king, God, is more accessible and more available to us during Elul and the Yamim Noraim than the rest of the year. Now is the time to reach out to form that relationship with God. And then on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, Eli encouraged us to enhance our tefillot by thinking about our relationship to God as king, as parent, as spouse. These are incredibly intimate relationships, and it is such a powerful way to think about our connection to God. Even in our tefillot, we affirm that God will respond if only we reach out. V'chol ma'aminim shehu oneh lachash, hapotech sha'ar ledovke b'tshuva. All believe that God responds to prayer, that God opens the gates to those who knock in repentance. And then tomorrow, only 3 days after Rosh Hashanah, we read in this week's Parsha Vayelech that God has hidden God's face. First, the pasuk tells us, V'histarti panai. God will hide God's face. And Rashi tells us it just seems as though God is hidden. It is as though Rashi is reassuring us. God is, of course, always present, even when we don't see or we can't feel God's face. But Rav Nachman of Breslov notes that in the following pasuk, there is a double language of hiddenness. The Anochi hastir astir. He explains that when we stop seeking God, God is not only concealed, but we forget that God is there at all. Not only have we sinned, causing God to hide God's face, haster, but we are now completely unaware of the need to look for God, astir. This is a serious and grave issue. What does it mean to be in a world where we have forgotten that God exists? How do we search for God? There is a story about Reb Nachman of Kosovo. Reb Nachman always strove to be close to God by constantly contemplating the Yud-K Vav-K, the 4-letter name for God. But when he became a vendor in a busy marketplace, he would become distracted and he would forget to focus on God's name. So Reb Nachman hired an assistant. And his sole job was to follow Reb Nachman around and serve as a reminder. When Reb Nachman looked into his assistant's face, he remembered the name of God. It seems to me that Reb Nachman understood the grave danger of the double hiddenness of God. His solution was to use our own divine reflections to serve as a reminder. When we become too busy with other things, we need to remember to look for the divine in each and every one of us. If we can remember this lesson, we will have a constant reminder of God in the world, and will remember to keep searching for God's face, even when it is hidden. This can be hard. Often we can find God's image only in those who are familiar and comfortable, and we miss so many opportunities to see God in the world. The Gemara in Sota offers another idea. The rabbis ask, what does it mean to walk in God's ways? Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Chanina, suggests that it means to emulate God. Just as God clothes the naked, visits the sick, comforts the mourners, and buries the dead, so too should we. If we engage in these essential acts, in taking care of our fellow man, often at their most vulnerable point, then we will be walking in God's path. These acts that Rabbi Chama mentions are ones that elevate our sense of purpose in the world. Walking in God's ways, lifting our eyes to see the divine reflection in each of us, enhances our relationship with God and serves to make us better people. Perhaps we read Vayelech during the Aseret Yemei Shuva to remind us that the path to shuva is not always easy. We shouldn't think that by simply showing up on Rosh Hashanah to daven, or offering mechila to everyone we see, that we have achieved this objective. If God hides God's face, or worse, we forget that God is there, there are devastating ramifications. During the Aseret Yemei Shuva, we need to remember to search for God. We can start by seeing the divine in each of us, by not just asking for mechila, but for truly looking for the tselem Elokim in each person, by working to care for our community and its most vulnerable, walking in God's ways. By walking in God's ways, we also enable our divine light to shine more brightly, helping to show those seeking for God what to search for. Looking around our tent on Rosh Hashanah, I was struck by how many people worked so hard to bring the community to this place where we could daven together as one community, safely and with beautiful, inspiring kavanah. I encourage all of us to find someone to appreciate for these Herculean tasks over the coming Shabbat. Yosef Karduner sings a beautiful song, which I will link to in the comments. He sings that even when God is hidden, even when we have forgotten that God is in the world, surely we will find God. That as we experience difficult things, we must stand in search of God. May we all find the divine presence that we seek within each other and within our actions. Shabbat Shalom.